Okay, here we're going to have two more examples regarding factoring and solving. So if we're solving, what we're going to do is we're going to set it equal to 0. We're solving what makes this equation 0. And in the previous videos we talked about factoring, and now we're talking about factoring with a leading coefficient. The 3 is the leading coefficient. Excuse me. And so the way that we do this is we take these two numbers, the 3 and the negative 14, and we multiply them together. So if we multiply those guys together, we get a negative 42. With that negative 42, we think about, okay, let's look at our middle term. What two numbers multiply to negative 42 but also add to negative 1? And that's going to be negative 6 and 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the negative 6 and the 7 into my middle term, because if I add these together, it gives me the negative x, what I have in the middle. And so I'm going to rewrite this quadratic. I am going to purposefully put the 6 next to the 3, and so the 3 and the 6 are next to each other. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the 7 and the 14, group those guys together. The reason for that is because I know that I'm going to factor by grouping, which means I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to split it down the middle, I'm going to look at what's on the left, and I'm going to say, okay, what's the greatest common factor? That's a 3x. So I pull a 3x out of that, and that leaves me with x minus 2 in parentheses. And then I'm going to say, okay, what's the greatest common factor here? And that's 7x minus 14, which is 7, a positive 7. So I'm going to pull out a positive 7, and that leaves me with x minus 2. You know you've set it up correctly when the x minus 2's, or what's in the parentheses, matches. So now, what I'm going to do is that this is actually a full term right here. So this whole piece is one term. Well, what does this whole term have in common? What's the greatest common factor? The x minus 2. So I'm going to take that out, and I have 3x plus 7. Oh, let me rewrite this here. Let's just cross that out. We got the x minus 2 pulled out, and the 3x plus 7. And this whole thing was equal to 0. So our zero product property states that if I have two terms being multiplied together, I can set each one equal to 0. You don't need the parentheses. I don't know why I did that. So I add 2 to both sides. X is equal to 2. I subtract 7 and divide by 3, and I get x is equal to negative 7/3. And we've discussed in previous problems that what I'm actually finding is this is a parabola. It opens up, and I know it opens up because of the positive 3. So if I graph this, the 2 is approximately here, the negative 7/3 is approximately here. The parabola goes through those 2 points. These are what we're finding, okay? The way that it's set up. I want to know when it equals 0. 0 is y, the equation is equal to 0 at these 2 points. Let's move on to our second. It's just extra practice. And so I'm going to go through this one a little bit quicker just so you can see some different numbers. And the process is the same. I'm going to take the 5 and the 8. I'll multiply them together. I'm going to get 40. Okay, so I have 40 is the 5 times 8. What two numbers multiply to 40 but also add to 14? That's 10 and 4. So I split the middle to 10x and 4x plus 8. I split the middle, pull out my greatest common factor on both sides, so I have 5x, x plus 2, pull out a 4, x plus 2, and the pattern is what's on the outside gets grouped together and the parentheses get grouped together. That's equal to 0. I'm going to set each one of these terms equal to 0 and solve. So I get x is equal to negative 4/5 and x is equal to negative 2. Those are two examples on how to factor and solve.